Welcome back to the Velo podcast. I'm Adam Cohen alongside Henry Winkelhake and Ben Rossi. And fellas, this was a great week for baseball, maybe the best week in the MLB offseason in between 2020 and 2021. But first off, how are you two doing?
I'm doing really well. I'm glad to be back on the show. Thank you, guys. I mean, I've been out there covering lots.
Well, I don't know about best week in the offseason.
Oh. Sorry, did I interrupt?
Ben, why don't you go ahead? I think the Wi-Fi is a little bit slow on.
Okay, yes. I just want to say, well, I'm glad to be back.
My bad, man. I think my internet might be a little bit.
It's okay. So, I just want to say I'm glad to be back. Been out there covering other sports that have been happening. I've had a lot of hockey coverage, and of course we're in the hard football season, so it's been hard to focus on baseball. But then now seeing all this baseball news here, it's been super reassuring for the game. And I will agree with you, Adam, that I think it has been ever since the last pitch was thrown in the World Series. It's been one of the best weeks, if not the best week of baseball news. Also talk about lots of good anticipation for the season coming, and I'm really hoping that America's pastime maybe starts taking center stage again soon.
Henry, you there, bud? You're completely frozen on my end. Ben, is he frozen on your end too?
Yeah.
It's a good shot of Henry though, but yeah, it has been an eventful week in baseball, and it's really refreshing. We've been seeing a lot of really good trades in the last couple of weeks with Blake Snell and Yu Darvish, and just the Mets also getting Lindor. So this is very refreshing, and there's obviously a lot of big names that have that came off the board this week, and we'll get into that. But first off, we want to talk about how MLB finally announced the start times of the season, and that's incredible. Looks like Henry could be back here. Henry, there, bud?
I think I'm finally back in. I'm sorry, guys. I think my Wi-Fi is acting up tonight. I just switched over to a personal hotspot, and I'm hoping that'll give me better luck for the rest of the show. My apologies for that, fellas.
No worries. You're coming loud and clear.
All right, awesome. Glad we're back on track. But I wanted to say, I kind of missed Ben's response. I hope I didn't miss anything too important there, Ben. I hope everything's going well for you. I know you started working on some other hockey articles as well. Happy to hear. We talked a little pre-show. Happy to hear that's going well. But Adam, I don't know if it's the best week of the offseason. I think maybe some Yankee bias might be shining through there. I know you had a great week. But certainly, I will say a lot of news on the hot stove to cover. I think things are heating up, and then some other good news as far as some more scheduling, administrative things in baseball. So it was definitely an informative week. I won't totally attack you for that point.
I could see where the Yankee bias comes. The Yankees obviously made a couple of big moves that we'll get into, but I think the best news of all was that it'll be a full 162-game season. Spring training will start on February 27th. Opening day will start on April 1st. And of course, things could change. There's still over a month until baseball starts, but I think this is great news. I think they're also trying to have fans back in the stadiums too. I know that there's obviously questions about health and safety and how many fans will be allowed in, and fans can even come in early as spring training. Nevertheless, this is really good to hear, and at least we're seeing some hint of normalcy coming into baseball in 2021.
Yeah, man, full steam ahead. It sounds like 162 games is the plan. At least that's the word the commissioner put out earlier this week, and getting started on time too as well, which is another huge piece of awesome news. So 60-game season was weird in so many ways last year, and it's kind of hard to get a representative sample size when we're used to such a long season. So definitely welcome news to hear that we should get the whole 162. I know obviously still a fluid situation and a lot of time still before the start of the season, but this is as good of news as we could hear at this point.
I am a little shocked, though, too, at this news, though. I want to say, I mean, it's interesting that we got this news about this confirmed start time, given that we've had, I think, I would argue almost as many uncertainties as we maybe had last offseason. I mean, of course, last offseason at this time, this was before, everything got changed. So, spring training was ready, underway at this time and everything. But, just not knowing where the vaccine is with it, not knowing about like the player owner negotiations yet, and having not decided about things like continuing some of the 2020 rules like the universal DH. I think it's a little surprising that it seems like we've already jumped, the commissioner's already jumped the gun to call the season now. So I mean, I will say that it's exciting. I can see it happening, but I still have to it's still one of those things I have to see it to believe it, just like how I had to see it to believe it with getting through the baseball season. I almost didn't think we'd get through the season after the first week last year, but we did. So I'm not going to obviously rule any of it out.
Ben, I want to thank you for reeling us back in and just showing how real this situation is, how COVID-19 could still be a huge part into MLB's 2021 season. And personally, I really hope they still include the 7-inning doubleheaders, because the Marlins and the Cardinals really had to rely on that in 2020. And that's kind of how they were able to get the season played out. And you also brought up a great point about how, well, maybe there will or won't be DHs, or there won't be an extra innings limit or adding any extra innings rules like they did last year with the runner on second base to start the inning. So those are definitely some questions to answer, but it's still great news, and it's still a good sign for things yet to come. And I do wonder also, I wonder how many fans will be allowed, perhaps in a 40,000 capacity stadium. I wonder if there will be about 8,000 fans, maybe about a fifth of the fans around. And I hope they make sure that everyone takes COVID-19 seriously and has all their precautions available as well.
You guys are making some great points. Certainly a lot left to be decided, and certainly a lot of uncertainty when it comes to how the virus is going to develop, how vaccines go for the next few months, and a lot of question marks still left to be answered. To the point of double headers and the extra inning runner on second rule, I did see reports earlier this week, I believe just a day or two ago, actually, that the MLB is proposing to keep both of those rules in play for 2021. And I think that is probably a good idea. Like Adam, like you were saying, teams like the Marlins and the Cardinals, that when you are impacted by COVID shutdowns, that I think that was a great way to make up some of that lost time. And then I think just easier too for the players, less demanding to go out there and play 9 back-to-back, is especially, catcher squatting down, doing that for 18 innings. And a lot of times you'll have a different catcher catch the second game, but still it's grueling on the body to do that long. So happy to see those changes are going to be sticking around. And it does sound like, as far as fans in the stands, that there is a lot yet to be decided on that, but the league does want to at least try and make it happen one way or another.
I think, I just think definitely, like, I'll agree with all those points that, like, the MLB should move forward with the whole doubleheader thing, with it being 7-game doubleheader. I don't think that's been a terrible idea either, but I just also think, with fans in the stands, that's also going to widely depend. I think the most realistic prediction for that is it's obviously going to go kind of state by state. Just seeing how it's been going for football and hockey now, for that matter. I don't know if basketball's had any teams with fans in the crowd, but hockey's had some kind of state by state, depending on how lax certain COVID guidelines are. So I think it's definitely going to be interesting, but I was also a little bit appalled at the fact that it's going to be left up to the teams in terms of how they'll do it, in terms of letting people in terms of vaccinations and stuff, how they're not going to require, how they're going to leave it up to different teams. So, I think my hope is that all teams will at least maybe consider, but depending on circumstances, maybe at least consider allowing fans in the crowd, to the very least fans who have been vaccinated, or having some efficient testing system in place for fans. Because I just think with baseball, where everything's outdoors too, I just think it can't hurt to try one of those ideas, or at least just consider it.
Another thing that we have to consider is how the owners lost a lot of money last year, and you even see teams like the Yankees, for example, they don't want to go over the luxury tax for the third straight year. They lost some money last year, and the Rays, for example, have been hit really hard. That was one of the reasons why they traded Blake Snell and are currently still shopping Kevin Kiermaier as well. So they want fans in there. But I like your point, Ben. I think they should maybe be vaccinated beforehand. I know over the summer when I was able to broadcast in Rockford, Illinois, we did have fans. We had them at limited capacity, but they had to be socially distanced. If they were in groups, they had to be in pods. They had to be 6 feet apart, of course, and wear a mask at all times. And I think if baseball can do something similar to this, and it'll vary from state to state depending how many cases are out, how many people are dying, of course, then I think that there could be a good chance that fans can remain in the stadiums in 2021.
And what another great incentive that would be to go out and get your shot if that's what it takes to get you into an MLB game. You sign me up. That another awesome push. Not that I don't want to get into any vaccine too deep real life conversations, but I'm kind of the thinking that you should get the shot if it's right for you. You've done your homework. But another great reason if that's what can get fans in the stands. And I love your guys' points too about state by state that. Even if the MLB does come out and say that your teams are allowed to have fans in the stands, if you're in a state like California, where I know COVID cases still higher than many other parts of the country, and where you see perhaps some different shutdown rules, that doesn't necessarily mean the Dodgers, the Athletics are going to be able to do that as well. It's kind of, I would suspect we maybe see something kind of like the NFL where it is different based on where you're playing. But the fact that the league would allow it in the first place, I think, is encouraging as long as it can be done safely.
Yeah, most definitely. And I just think it's especially impactful, and where the focus has to especially go is towards the minor leagues and figuring something out with that. Because, I mean, if there's any concern to have about the MLB, besides maybe the collective bargaining agreement, besides some of the lost revenue last year, I just think the MLB has the ability to make that up and stuff, because they still get the TV revenue, they still get that. But I'm especially concerned for the minor leagues and how they're going to continue to survive. So I especially think it's vital that the minor league teams will be able to find a way to get their fans in the crowd, to continue to bring these communities together. Because, I mean, minor league teams were already reduced with that new agreement this year. And I mean, I'm sure most baseball fans would hate to see minor league teams have to be reduced farther due to lost revenues, because they were hit especially hard. They didn't even have a season last season. So I'm really hoping that they can at least figure something out with minor league teams too, in terms of getting fans in the crowd. Those are going to be I think some of the bigger stakeholders we're talking here.
It certainly is telling, and it's not great that MLB hasn't really had the minor league stadiums and teams so much in their discussions about having fans in the ballpark and making sure that their season can be played, because MLB owners and just MLB in general really did these minor league teams dirty last year. And even during the offseason, they turned a lot of these minor league teams into draft elite teams, and it's not the same anymore. Just look at what happened to the Staten Island Yankees and how they pretty much had to shut down their team. So it's really sad. And I think if any team or any part of baseball needs fans, then of course they do, because that's really the only way they're going to make money. Not a lot of people are going to watch minor league baseball on TV or listen to on the radio. They're going to want to watch Major League Baseball. So it's very important that happens for them.
I mean, I'm glad you guys brought up the minor leagues too, because I mean, even if you did have the opportunity, or even if you did want to rather watch minor league baseball, listen to it on the radio, a lot of teams don't have that opportunity, and you're not getting that same revenue stream that you're getting at the big league level. So certainly more important, even more so for them to be able to have fans in the stands. But just the game is in a rough financial state all around, even at the big league level. And I think that led to a lot of the speculation that the owners would want a shortened season, that they were going to push for less than 162 at the big league level. And it just sounded like ultimately the players even less willing to budge on that than they were last year. And when we saw things get a little bit ugly leading into the beginning of last season, we were talking about prorated salaries and everything like that. So, I mean, it sounds like there's no huge, I mean, I guess if we're moving forward with 162, then no huge fight looming on that, which is at least encouraging. But I mean, you never know this far out. Things could still change.
It does seem like the labor piece is at least better heading into 2021 than it was into 2020. We're not going to see these huge fights on Twitter and players and owners going at it. I think that's a relief to all fans across Major League Baseball. But I think we've hit a lot of points on this topic, and moving on, the big news of the week, of course, a news that I'm very, very happy about. This is where my Yankee bias might be coming in a bit, but the Yankees signed their man. They salvaged their offseason. They signed DJ LeMahieu to a 6-year, $90 million deal. signed Corey Kluber to a 1-year, $11 million deal. And guys, I think this is a great move for the Yankees. It makes up for the Lindor Carrasco trade that they missed on last week. And also, they kind of saved LeMahieu from going to Toronto, an AL East rival, because the Blue Jays offered a 4-year, $78 million deal to counter, but LeMahieu just wanted to stay in the Big Apple.
No bias there, Adam, saying that those two were both very, very good moves for the Yankees and certainly salvaging the offseason as well, and would have been an otherwise very quiet offseason for New York. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense. LeMahieu's been one of the best hitters on the Yankees for the last 2 seasons now. So keep him around. He's fundamental to that lineup. And I think the price is right, man. You look at 6-year, $90 million deal for LeMahieu. I mean, that's $15 million a season, which is really a bargain for an MVP caliber player. And he will be, I believe, 34 next season, Adam. It's in that ballpark, if not 34. So I mean, maybe a little bit in the later years of that deal. I mean, you really don't even have to worry at $15 million a season. That's not going to be crippling or anything. And then take an upside flyer on Corey Kluber for 1 year, $11 million. Why not? I think great deal for the Yankees and certainly needed the starting pitching.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd say, going into this offseason, the Yankees honestly were a lot of people's biggest concern in terms of spending, in terms of being over the luxury tax, as you alluded to, Adam, but just to see them get these great deals. First, just a great deal on LeMahieu. I mean, he's been obviously you guys all touched on how he's been the real staple of your team, but I'm really liking the Corey Kluber deal, especially just given a lot of the inconsistencies with pitchers, even though you had like an ace in Garrett Cole. I mean, it just didn't seem like behind Garrett Cole, you really had that it factor, and we need more than that. Like a lot of the teams who go all the way usually have more of that like it factor in their rotation than just one pitcher, even if they don't have as much, even though they did have some bullpen, I still feel like you need it with the starter. You need the early innings from the starters. The Dodgers had that in their team, and that's what helped them in their World Series run. Now the Yankees getting Kluber. If Kluber can bounce back to the form we saw, I'm really liking this move. And I kind of knew the Yankees had to go after pitching if I was going to really take them seriously as a competitor this offseason.
You both made some amazing points, and Henry, you hit a nail on it. How LeMahieu got that 6-year on this contract, and he really bargained for the Yankees. He originally wanted a 5-year, $100 million deal. Some reports even said 5 years, $125 million, and he wanted that 5th year. The Yankees weren't budging, but just to please LeMahieu, not to have him dismayed how he felt like a week ago, they added that 5th and 6th year just to keep him longer. It's going to look good in the front of the contract, maybe not so much when he's in his age 38 season last year, but $15 million won't hurt them. And Kluber, I think you're right, Ben. It really does help save the rotation because Kluber can really come back to his 2013 to 2018 ace form. He had about a 33.2 F4, I believe, during that time, won 2 Cy Young Awards and was incredible. And even though he's 35, even though he's coming off a couple arm injuries, it wasn't Tommy John surgery. One was a freak accident where he got hit by a line drive. The other one was a muscle tear, but it wasn't a UCL tear. So there's reason to believe he can come back. And Yankees might not be done yet. They still have $4.8 million in cap space. And fellas, do you think the Yankees are going to make another splash? Can they do that while staying under the luxury tax, or are they going to go over?
I mean, I would think that if there is this much of a concentrated effort to stay under and you've made those 2 signings, I wouldn't expect a large enough splash to go over that threshold. But I mean, I think there's a fair amount of kind of Corey Kluber-ish guys where you could go out and get another kind of low-cost starting pitcher and maybe supplement the rotation further that way. I'm going to have to look up some names. I'm drawing a blank on who exactly they are right now, but I've heard all throughout the offseason there is a ton of these kind of low-risk, high-upside pitchers that not aces. They're not Trevor Bauers per se, which Corey Kluber has been and maybe could be again. So good on the Yankees for getting him. I think both of those signings make a lot of sense and help cement New York back as a contender. I mean, obviously they were last year, but I mean, back in the driver's seat in the AL East, I would say. Yeah,
I think what New York could do too is, I mean, there's, like you were saying, Henry, it's like a lot of availability, like guys who are good bargains that are not like center stars, but like a kind of close good bargains. I feel like there's a lot of those guys available on the market, especially like if they wanted to add to their bullpen or something, because that's always kind of the last area you see a lot of teams spending on with free agency, apart from like the top two guys. So I think I think the Yankees definitely have it in them to spend a little more this offseason, especially with like the way we're seeing teams go and stuff. The one thing I wonder though is, how is the Yankees farm system? Do they have enough development in their farm system now in terms of moving forward? Adam would probably know that one best.
Yankees farm system is still one in the bottom tier of baseball. If there's a top 15, Yankees are certainly in the bottom 15. But they have some young players such as Clark Schmidt and David Garcia who are knocking on the door. Esteban Florial was incredible. And Jason Dominguez, who has a long way to go before he reaches MLB level. He is a switch hitter with 450-foot bombs and 110-mile-per-hour exit velocity. So they have some talented guys coming up. But I think you guys are both right how the Yankees may try to make another splash. Some good bargains in the open market could be Masahiro Tanaka for around $15 million, Jake Odorizzi reaching 8 figures or so, and they could also get Garrett Richards, but they might not go that high. I think a good person for them could be a Rich Hill, someone who could be a 5-inning person, just add more rotation depth. They have a good 5 right now with Severino coming back into the rotation some point this season. But they could sign a Rich Hill or even go to the bullpen a little bit and sign a Ben Rossi in, or go after Yosmero Petit, someone just to add another reliever to the mix, because they really relied on Chapman, Green, and Britton last year. I think this team would look a lot better and have a lot more depth.
I agree, Adam. And then just to save some skin on my low-cost starting pitchers I was trying to mention, you could even maybe bring back a J.A. Happ type of guy. There's guys like Tyler Chatwood, Jose Quintana, John Lester, who happen to all be Cubs and should be cheap pitchers in the offseason. And they're not great, but possibly low-cost options. Julio Teheran, Anibal Sanchez, James Paxton, perhaps even taking a discount as well, just to show that I wasn't totally making that up. There are still some starting pitchers left out there you can take a fly on.
Well, the Yankees probably won't be going after Bauer or any of the big names like that. This is the biggest moves that they'll make this offseason. Anyone else will be secondary to what just happened. But the White Sox also made an incredible move during this past week. They signed Liam Hendriks to a 3-year, $54 million deal. And that deal is especially interesting because no matter what happens after the third year, whether the White Sox pick up his 4th-year option, he is guaranteed that $54 million. So if the White Sox don't pick up the option, he gets a $15 million buyout, which is nearly unheard of. And that's really cool. And the White Sox now have one of the best bullpens in baseball. They have Garrett Crochet, who was drafted the same year, but also throws 100 miles per hour, is effective out of the pen. They also have Aaron Bummer, who's always been effective. So it seems like almost there's a clash right now between the Yankees. You could add in the Rays and the Mets too, but the Yankees, Rays, White Sox, even the Astros a little bit. Those seem like the really big teams on the AL powerhouse. And I feel like the Yankees may come on top, but it's getting awfully close between those 4.
It's going to be a fun race to watch in the AL for sure. And I'd say a fun one in the NL as well. And it's weird to just see a couple teams, some concentrated spending, not a whole lot of teams looking to go out and add a whole lot in free agency or via trade this offseason. But the White Sox, certainly one of them, and making a move rather that is a signal of a contending team, going out there and getting a stud guy for the back of your bullpen. Ben will be able to tell us all about how awesome Liam Hendriks is. He's seen firsthand for the last few years being an A's fan out there. But for a young up-and-coming team in the White Sox, I think this is kind of the icing on the cake to go ahead and supplement that bullpen a little bit. And I think they're going to win a whole lot of games in 2021. And it is going to be a real awesome race to watch with some of those other dominant AL teams Adam mentioned.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. Tony La Russa, this might be one of the better teams in his career, despite being a 3 World Series champ, that Tony La Russa will have to work with as far as rosters go. Tony La Russa has to feel lucky right now going into his first year, especially. I think Liam Hendriks just put an exclamation point on their bullpen because, that was their biggest weakness. It's funny. It's almost like they're taking a piece out of the team that defeated them last year, because last season, wild card game, Liam Hendriks was the one who came through in the last few innings and ended the White Sox season dreadfully in that wild card series. I mean, if it wasn't for Liam Hendriks, the White Sox might have gotten past the A's, but Liam Hendriks was able to outcompete a bunch of the White Sox bullpen guys down the line as the White Sox struggled to play their pieces in those last few innings against the A's, giving the A's that slight edge in the wild card series. But I mean, he's going to be, I mean, but now I think they found that guy in Liam Hendriks. He can give you a few late innings. He's not a one inning relief closer either. He's one of those rare closers that can be just as effective in the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings as long as his command's there with his slider, those devastating fastball as we've seen too, and he just always approaches the mound with that same confidence. And I mean, he's going to be one of the most missed players in Oakland I can remember in a while. Man, I'm not saying I expected the A's to sign him, given how we have so much other bullpen depth, and given how we had to be flexible if we wanted to keep especially some of our hitters with the arbitration guy, which we did sign 6 arbitration eligible hitters. So it looked like we were bound to move on from Hendriks, but I'm gonna really miss Liam Hendriks. He was just always that reliable force to be on the mound. We called him Herculeum. He was just a great guy too. Gave a lot back to the community, and he's just left Oakland with great dignity and gave a great message to the fans of the green and gold. He's gonna be a great piece in the White Sox, and he has a great career ahead for sure.
I'm very happy to hear that he helped the Oakland community off the field as well, and he's certainly been one of the more dominant relievers in baseball. Perhaps he is the most dominant reliever in baseball right now, and the White Sox signing him to the back end of their bullpen. They've made a flurry of moves this offseason, signing Yoelkis Cespedes, who's the #1 international draft prospect, and adding Lance Lynn to the team, and signing Adam Eden. So they are certainly primed for a deep postseason run. But also by acquiring Liam Hendriks, they also stole him away from the Dodgers, who were heavily interested and heavily rumored to get him. And I think it's a good move on the Dodgers' part to actually let him walk and let him sign with the White Sox, because they already have a decent bullpen that actually did carry them to the World Series. It can certainly be improved. They should certainly add some more players, but to sign someone for that much, and a flurry of relievers always going to be coming up and helping out the Dodgers, and Dodgers being such a crafty team, it was probably the right choice to pass on him.
Well, not to mention just how fickle relievers are in general, that year to year the production just varies so much. And I mean, that's what you see in a small sample size, not even necessarily a criticism of relievers, but it is a risky investment. And I believe that was the highest average annual value in a reliever contract, that Hendriks deal, which, I mean, it's not the $100 million that Chapman got over a longer period. But I would almost feel more comfortable, with a guy like Aroldis Chapman, who has such a long established track record of dominance. I mean, as awesome, and he's been absolutely amazing, Liam Hendriks has these last 2 seasons. But I mean, you could say it's been a season and a half, or a season and a third, even with the shortened 2020 year. And I mean, it almost seemed like it kind of came out of nowhere. That, I mean, he was decent, but he wasn't like best reliever in baseball prior to 2019, was he?
He was nowhere near. Well, actually, prior to 2019, he was actually pretty abysmal, I will say. Actually, he was one of the A's most struggling relievers. He was really struggling with his command on a lot of levels and everything, which he still does occasionally. I mean, he's not perfect, obviously, but no one predicted that he would be his kind of pitcher here. He was a virtual unknown. In fact, the A's even released him after the 2018 season. Actually, in the 2018 season, when the A's had the most dominant bullpen in baseball, he was the one bullpen pitcher who wasn't doing good, and then they released him that season. But then he made a dramatic comeback in 2019. It was the complete opposite. When the rest of our bullpen struggled in 2019, he was an all-star for us. So it's like when the bullpen's not doing well, he's one of those pitchers who can pick us up. So he's definitely one of the more inspirational comeback stories I've seen in these past years. And yeah, I understand why the Dodgers didn't go after him, and because they're kind of also one of those teams that's like looking out for their future too. And a prime example of that is how they were able to re-sign Bellinger to another year, also re-signing Austin Barnes, Julio Urias, and Corey Seager, all big parts of the World Series team, which I think it would have been a lot harder for them to do had they really tried to pursue Hendriks here. I like how they're keeping a lot of their core together.
the Dodgers did settle with a lot of players in arbitration, which certainly helps him out. And it is really cool, of course, going back to Liam Hendricks, how he had such a great success story in Oakland. And I know he'll be sorely missed there, but at least he'll perhaps take the White Sox further into the playoffs too. He'll be a great addition to their team. And other news that happened throughout the week is that Francisco Tatis Jr. is trying to sign a massive extension for him. And this kind of blows the Acuna extension out of the ballpark, which is what Henry and I and our fellow Velo members were talking about in our group chat. Because Acuna had a 8-year, $100 million deal or something, and it had a couple of options as well. But this could be a 10-year, $210 million, $230 million type of deal. And Tatis Jr. only has about a year and a half experience in the major leagues, and he kind of deserves an extension too. He's one of the most electric players in baseball, and the Padres are wise to lock him up for years to come rather than maybe exploring other moves for the time being.
Well, it just goes to show how amazing he is that we're talking about a 10-year, $200+ million contract, and he has only been around for like a little over a season. But I mean, how amazing! Or I'm sorry, he was here all of 2019 as well. So little, season and a third or whatever. But he is such a beast. I think he totally deserves the money. I think it makes sense for San Diego to go ahead and lock him up if they can. He is the face of that team, and now they have a whole lot of amazing supporting cast guys around him. That starting rotation taking a huge step forward in this offseason and last year with the Mike Clevenger trade as well. So, I mean, if you've got winners built around him, I think it totally makes sense. Lock in Tatis, pay that man, and then try and win a couple championships over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's blowing all these other deals out of, like, it's even blowing like the last year's Mookie Betts deal with the Dodgers out of like this world. Like I think Mookie Betts deal, what was his last year, was around $100 million, but yeah, does the fact that Tatis is already surpassing that, and he's only like barely played one full season, and just what he brings to the game of baseball is immense and important in terms of like growing it, his persona and his grind to the game of baseball is something that we want to see moving forward. And I just feel like it's how appropriate it is that he maybe starts to get this extension soon.
And I think the extensions are really the way to go right now, because a lot of teams have no idea what their future will be like financially. So to lock up the young core, and teams relying on their young core almost more than ever, and really just having this whole attitude of let the kids play, it's really great for Tatis. And the Padres, of course, are still not done making moves. They're having interest in Masahiro Tanaka right now, but he also might be heading back to Japan, which would be insane. I mean, not too insane because he was a legend there, but he's still had such a successful major league career. It's pretty bizarre to see him leave the States, and especially considering that he has a lot of suitors as well.
I agree, Adam. That move, or potential move, the rumors of it have definitely struck me as odd. That a guy who has had a very good MLB career, and I guess it does make sense when you consider, Japan being his home and some place where he had a lot of success as well. So maybe it's kind of just an issue of personal preference. But I mean, everybody needs starting pitching. I guess perhaps teams are a little bit less willing to spend in this offseason than they typically were, but the game has been trending that way in the last couple of years, unfortunately. But you would think that a guy like Tanaka could still end up getting a deal somewhere, and I'm sure he can, but I mean, maybe it just comes down to him preferring to play in Japan. But I mean, that would be strange.
Yeah, there's just a lot of, I just think, I mean, with like maybe some of the quandary about this country, what's going on, and uncertainty about like our game, and like maybe, and like, I don't know, I mean, it's hard to argue that like we're that much better than the Japanese league too. I mean, in terms of our players too. So I mean, in some ways, if he's going to get more of that deal, and if there's more clearness with that league, I kind of can't blame the decision in terms of pursuing to go to Japan. But I think I feel like maybe teams should give him more thought. I mean, if only we were spending more, I mean, down the line for sure.
I don't know why, but this is making me think of that argument. Would he rather be a small fish in a big pond or a big fish in a small pond? And if Tanaka were to return to Japan, he would be probably the best pitcher there, or one of them. But in the major leagues, he'll be a slightly above average pitcher, but not the best one by far. So maybe that's his logic as well. And I'm sure a Japanese team would be happy to pay him a very hefty penny, perhaps even one that could rival some of the major league teams, especially since they're struggling financially as well. And that could be some other reasons why this is happening. And speaking about the big bust that's happening right now, JT Realmuto was offered a 5-year, $100 million contract, or slightly north of that. And he actually wanted a contract, rumors had it, about $200 million. But I think because of the lack of suitors that he has and lack of people willing to pay a catcher who's about to turn 30 that much, probably goes to show that he'll be closer to $100 million rather than $200 million.
Yeah, that is a huge gap. And it was the Phillies that were reported coming in at that 100 million mark. So I suspect he will get maybe somewhere a little bit closer to the 130, 140 range, if I had to guess. I think. But, I mean, there really aren't a whole lot of suitors lining up to add a catcher or really to add anybody at this point in time. It's been a handful of teams making all the moves this offseason. Definitely some concentrated buyers. But, I mean, the Phillies certainly don't appear to be on the verge of a rebuild or anything. You have all that money committed to Bryce Harper. You just went out and got Zach Wheeler last offseason. So, I mean, it would be kind of weird to see them wanting to let Realmuto go. So I would assume that he will end up being back in Philadelphia one way or another, especially now that the Mets had James McCann as well, and that Steve Cohen's not going to be able to back up the Brinks truck for 2 catchers.
Yeah, I could kind of also see that happening in terms of JT Realmuto negotiating, but I mean, he's one of those rare 2-value players. So in some ways, I'm a little surprised that teams aren't pursuing the options with the catchers. But at the same, then again, you look at it, it's also one of the more vulnerable positions with with certain things. And some guys wonder if maybe they're spending a little too much on that in terms of being so dependent on this guy who's a catcher who goes out every day, is squatting, not taking anything away from catchers, but I was wonder if teams are willing to really put that much into there. But I think I'm confident about JT Realmuto signing a big contract somewhere. I mean, even he could, who knows, we could even have a middle of the season thing happen, like what happened with Dallas Keuchel, Craig Kimbrell a couple of years ago, how they kind of signed mid-season when they were kind of holding out and struggling. So I feel like a lot of teams are being smart too, with kind of waiting a little bit till they make the splash and maybe get that better negotiation deal, especially with the uncertainty of the CBA and all that.
In the past couple of off seasons, it's almost been a game of cat and mouse where the team's waiting the player, the player's waiting the team, and nothing really happens until February. The biggest free agents don't come off the board until then. And either way, JT Realmuto will get paid, but he doesn't have too many suitors, as the Mets have James McCann. The Angels just signed Kurt Suzuki. The Blue Jays might try to go after Springer, and they have a lot more reason to go after Springer because they need help in the outfield, and the Mets probably cannot afford him at this point. So it seems almost destined that he'll return in Philadelphia, and he'll get about a $100 million contract, but probably kiss his dreams of $200 million goodbye.
Well, and there's really no reason to pay him $200 million if there aren't all that many teams that you're going to be bidding against. And you could perhaps, there's rumors you could go out and get a guy like Wilson Contreras, who's got 2 years left to control and is going to be owed $6 million in 2021, and then slight raise from arbitration after that. But I mean, he's not JT Realmuto at all. Realmuto's the best catcher in the league, best at that position. And Ben, you mentioned both offensively and defensively, a great talent. But I mean, he's not 10 times better than Contreras. I think that would probably be the more value play. Not to surprise add a topic to the show. Just weighing in my 2 cents there that wouldn't make sense to give him $200 million. But slow playing in free agency has definitely been a trend over these last couple of years. And I loved seeing earlier this week that DJ LeMahieu just was telling the Yankees, I'm sick and tired of it. I'm sick and tired of y'all waiting to give me a deal. And he put the pressure on, and then they go out and they give him a deal that works for both sides. So power to the players. You got to stand up for yourselves, and don't let these owners push you around until the first days of spring training.
And another big aspect of this week, and it was a very busy week for every single team because they had to make arbitration settlements this past week. And Francisco Lindor I believe he has a top 5 arbitration pact with the New York Mets. It's over $20 million, and good for him. Good that he's getting paid. He's one of the most exciting players in the game. Most teams actually settle with their players, but there were 13 players who did not settle, and that includes Shohei Ohtani and also includes Carlos Correa, who is $3 million apart with the Astros, which is a huge figure heading into arbitration as well. He wanted $12.75 million. The Astros counted $9.75, and it's probably going to be brutal how that's going to go down, especially since he's a very capable player, but who's had a long injury-prone history.
I was going to say that sounds stressful for Correa to be that far off. He might want to go out and get a massage after that, but just be careful not to break any ribs.
That's a fair point. I just wanted to mention that quickly. I know we didn't have that in our notes, but that was something of interest this past week. But another big topic that we're going to get into right now is the top 10 left fielders. And we started this segment last year. We're going to try to handle it a bit more efficiently. We're kind of all over the place, going from random position to random position. Next week, we'll do top 10 center fielders. But this week, we'll do top 10 left fielders. And starting with number 10 on my list, I put down Lourdes Gurriel Jr. He had an excellent 2020 campaign. He was a surprising player that came out of nowhere, seemingly came out of nowhere, batted over 300, had double-digit home runs, which is a good feat for 2020. And even though he hasn't played in the big leagues all too long, only 206 games, he has a lot of power, and it seems like he's just getting started.
Yeah, I wanted to mention Lourdes on my list as well. He was honorable mention, just missed the cut for me, but I certainly can't fault Adam for including. I went with Randy Arozarena at number 10 for me, which I may seem low to some people given his postseason heroics last year. The reason I was just a little bit hesitant, I almost left him off, is that he wasn't a super high prospect or anything. It kind of seemed to come out of nowhere a little bit for Arozarena, and I know he had a little bit of off-field troubles in this offseason as well, so we'll be interested to see if that impacts his season in 2021, but the talent's undeniable. You saw all those home runs hit in the postseason, so we'll be excited to see him again and see how he follows up that performance.
Yeah, my 10th pick, I'd say, was a little more of a sleeper because he wasn't necessarily an everyday guy for the Dodgers, but Jock Peterson, who I know you guys put on your list. I put him a little lower just because, he wasn't really every day there for the Dodgers, but when he came out, though, he's continued to display impressive power. He's a player I really like, so I'm hoping that I just feel like I'm hoping to see him play a little more. So he just cracked my top 10 for me, but I can kind of see your pick there with Arozarena maybe being a little farther down. But yeah, I'd have to go. I like Jock Peterson as my number 10 pick.
Peterson's a safe pick to have lower in the top 10 list. He's shown greatness in the past. He has 30 homer pop. It'll be interesting to see where he signs in the offseason as well, because after George Springer, the list of outfielders does get a lot worse, and then you have Brantley and Peterson, and then keeps going lower and lower. So whoever teams end up signing him, they could expect him to be a bounce-back candidate, and he still struggles a lot against lefties, but he's still a very good player. And Arozarena, I understand as well. He did kind of jump out of nowhere. He started being hot in September and carried that into the postseason, but he's still rather young. He's still eligible for the Rookie of the Year, but he can certainly climb the lists as the season goes on. But moving on into the number 9 pick, I put Kyle Schwarber there. And he's another player who's also due for a bounce-back season, also due for 30-plus home runs as well. I know Henry's kind of kicking himself right now that the Cubbies non-tendered him, and he should be a really great player in Nationals Park, has adding to that order of Josh Bell and Juan Soto. And he's always had great pop, had great on-base percentage. So expect him to be a 30-homer player, have a 350 on-base percentage, and really contribute to the Nationals lineup.
I'm right there with you, Adam. I have Kyle Schwarber at number 9 as well. Everybody knows about the pop in the bat. Great power hitter. I'd love to see more lineup protection for Juan Soto as well. But I think he's actually a little bit of an underrated fielder these days, too. He's come a long way with the glove. He's dropped a lot of weight since he first came up in the league. A lot more agile out there in left field, and not the defensive liability he once was. So I'm wishing Kyle nothing but the best in Washington.
I actually had to, unfortunately, because of some of the defensive stuff and inconsistencies, I actually left, probably to Henry's dismay, I left Kyle Schwarber off my list. He didn't quite crack my list there. My number 9, I went with Eddie Rosario. I'm really interested to see where he signs with this offseason. I mean, he's constantly put up some decent numbers. I mean, batting average north of 270 most years, apart from this past season. And he's been overshadowed by some of the other good hitters with the Minnesota Twins. But like, he also is capable of displaying some power too, and it's pretty incredible for his size. I feel like Eddie Rosario is one of those players. He was just kind of been forgotten a little bit these past years, but like I think he still has kind of the top 10 stuff, and I'm kind of looking for a big bounce back. So that's why I put him at number 9.
I honestly really wanted to put Rosario on my list, but my biggest concerns about him was he doesn't get on base that often. He can be a defensive liability, but you're right, Ben. The power is certainly there. Can certainly be a 30-homer player, perhaps a little bit more in the right ballpark. And he has been a very good player for the Twins in the past few years, so definitely not a bad choice to put him in the top 10. As for my number 8 pick, I put Jock Peterson there, even though, as we mentioned, he had a tough 2020 campaign. He always seems to figure it out. He's always struggled against lefties, but he's still one of the better outfitters in baseball. And left field's a bit of a weak position, but he still ranks in the top 10 for me.
Yeah, I like Peterson a lot too. I like Rosario a lot too. He's a guy I have a little bit higher up in my list. But number 8 for me, Ben, was actually a member of the A's, and Mark Canha. I think he's a little bit of a sleeper out there in left field. Yeah, I think he's got a lot of pop in that bat. Still hits for a really good average, and a kind of a versatile fielder as well. Can play a little bit of first base, can play a little bit of center field. I think mostly slotting in at left field is why I included him here on this list. But actually had a 913 OPS in 2019. So definitely good offensive numbers there. Pretty good with the glove, and not a super deep position, but I felt pretty good about Canha at number 8.
I think Canha is a really good pick. In fact, I had him for a lot of those same reasons you just mentioned, Henry. I had him on higher on my list. One guy who I had number 8 just because he had a really good season was Jesse Winker from the Reds. I just think that he put up impressive stats with his average. Looks like he had some of the above. I think his fielding was above average, if I'm not mistaken. But just I feel like he's one of those guys. It's like he's not. I don't know him that well, but the stats kind of spoke for himself, and he seemed to be the one of the more consistent hitters in the league last year. So he had to be on my list somewhere.
Both Winker and Canha are really underrated outfitters. Winker finally broke out in 2020. He's long been a heralded prospect in the Reds system and took a little while to get up. And it's nice to see him having success. And Canha is such an underrated outfielder. He kind of does everything right, gets on base, has a little bit of pop. He's good defensively too. He's higher on my list as well. So that's a very good choice as well. For my number 7 pick, I had Tommy Pham. When he's healthy, when he's going well, he's a 2020 player who's not too bad defensively. Had a little bit of a tough 2020 campaign as well, like a lot of players on this list. And you can't blame them too much for a rough 2020 since it's a weird year, but Pham looks like to be another player who's going to bounce back, and especially with so many great hitters in the Padres lineup, it seems like he'll have a lot of protection and probably get a lot of good counting stats as well.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I was going to say, Adam. The counting stats and lineup protection are going to be as good as they ever have been for Pham. I have him a couple spots higher, but number 7 for me is Jock Peterson. You guys have definitely, I know you guys mentioned him already. The only couple points I want to add on Jock is I'm excited actually to see him leave that Dodgers lineup because while he could get great counting stats, great protection, he didn't always play every day for the Dodgers. So I think he could find an opportunity to get a little bit more reliable playing time, and we see perhaps some of those stats take a boost there as well. I also love him in MLB The Show. That's another reason why I had to rank Peterson a little higher.
Yeah, and then going down the list, I agree with you, Adam. That's why I had in terms of Tommy Pham and his big impact. That's why I had him farther up. And then and then going from number 7 to number 6, Mark Canha. Just another thing I want to mention about Mark Canha is, the reason why he maybe is a little underrated was he wasn't an everyday player before, and that's what the A's are known for doing. They're known for developing guys who weren't seen as everyday players initially, because initially he kind of struggled a little bit to hit righties and stuff, but now he's kind of figured himself out and he became an everyday fielder his last couple of years, and he's capable of just really good situational hitting where he hits the ball to various fields. So he'll be a force to be reckoned with soon. And then going up on my list, just to speed this up a little faster, we have another player that you already mentioned, Randy Arozarena. I ranked him a little higher. I agree that maybe you can't just judge from that single postseason performance, but I mean he's above average in a lot of areas too. His speed, his arm, and then he wasn't above. I didn't think of him as much of a power hitter, but then to see him break that whole postseason record with home runs makes me think he can just do it all. So that's why I ranked him really that high.
There's no way that Randy Arozarena could be left off my list, and he's also comes in at number 6 for me. He's an absolute stud. I know he came a little bit out of nowhere, but if you have that type of performance at the biggest stage, and you already had a good September before that, you're already starting to be highly regarded in the St. Louis Cardinals system before he was traded to the Rays, it seems like he can do no wrong besides his off-field antics. But on the field, he's lovable. He's exciting. He's never a player with the let's the kids play attitude, and I'm excited for what he can do with Tampa Bay. They have a new bona fide star in their lineup.
We'll see. I'm certainly excited to see him as well. I think a whole lot of talent, whole lot of tools, as you guys mentioned. Perhaps a little bit, certainly less established than some of these other guys on this list, but all the talent in the world, no doubt. Number 6 for me was Eddie Rosario, who was a surprising non-tender from the Twins. I think he's been so steadily reliable, hits for a good average, hits for pop, and where he hasn't been quite so steady is the glove. It has kind of fluctuated year to year. He's gone from being 8 or 9 or worth 8 or 9 defensive run saves to being worth negative 8 or 9 defensive runs saved on any given year. So a little bit of inconsistent out there, but also kind of tough to place him in this list, not knowing where he's going to end up yet.
Yep, and then for sure with that thing with Eddie Rosario, I didn't think about his inconsistencies with the glove too, maybe his deficiencies. And then, going down my list to number 4, I think a popular guy that I maybe didn't have as high as some of you guys did, maybe because of his past inconsistencies, but one guy I really like is Marcell Ozuna at number 4. I know his fielding values maybe gone out a little bit and being utilized as a DH, but what he's done last season, being kind of the core of that Braves lineup, he's well deserving of a spot high up on my list. And then one guy I may have ranked a little higher than you guys did was Michael Brantley's at number 3 for me. And I just think Michael Brantley, he just has really good discipline, really low strikeout rate over the years. It's super underrated with what he can do. He's just kind of one of those hitters that just gives pitchers headaches. So I really think Michael Brantley deserves a lot more recognition than he's been getting. It surprised me that he hasn't been like the highest value player in the league.
Brantley's incredibly underrated. He's a pure player. He's a pure hitter, and that's really refreshing to see in the game of baseball today. Yankees were even considering a little bit before going after LeMahieu, and he's going to end up being a great addition to any team that signs him. And just to speed things up, as Ben was alluding to and going down the list, since we have very similar lists, but just kind of a bit rearranged, Mark Canha was my number 5 pick. He is an underrated player and he kind of does everything right. He also is a very safe pick on Fangraphs, looking to be an above-average player yet again in 2021. Brantley was 4 from my list. I think he's going to be almost a DJ LeMahieu, Jeff McNeil type of player for whatever team. So he's going to be a great veteran presence, whoever lands on. Then number 3, I have Eloy Jimenez. And I don't know, it was very, very tough for me to put him behind Marcell Ozuna because a lot of predictions say that he'll have more home runs than Ozuna, and he has more hype than Ozuna because Ozuna might have peaked in 2020, at least offensively. It'll be interesting to see if he can replicate that in 2021. But I think it's pretty interchangeable between those two, and Jimenez is certainly becoming a great bat in that White Sox lineup.
I love Eloy a lot too, and kind of the way I broke that tie for me, I had them back-to-back on my list as well, is I think Eloy is close to as good as Marcell is right now already, and then just, being so much younger and the talent and the upside, I think hopefully he could be on the verge of a breakthrough. So I actually went with Eloy at number 2. just run down, catch you all up real quick. I had Tommy Pham at 5, Michael Brantley 4, and then Ozuna at 3, and then Eloy my 2. And I know we've pretty much covered all of those guys already.
Yep, and I also had Eloy at 2. I mean, I really just love what he's done this year with his power and everything, and I mean, leading through that White Sox lineup, and he just seems to continue. He just seems to continue to grow. I mean, what's there not to like about him? I just think he even has more of a future than Marcell Ozuna too. That's why I ranked him, and even Michael Brantley a little higher than Ozuna. And then we all agreed on number 1 pick. I think we can all agree on one of the prettiest swings in the game, one of the most entertaining guys to watch, capable of both power and high average, Christian Yelich.
That was a de facto pick. I would have been livid if you guys did not put him at the number 1 pick. So I'm glad that our great baseball minds thought alike here. He did have a down 2020 season, but he's still Christian Yelich. He still can be a 30-30 player. Even his average takes a little bit of a dip. He'll still get on base a lot too. And he's also a couple years removed from an MVP season as well. And he's just an absolute stud. And he's really just keeping the Brewers team alive and their playoff hopes alive too.
He is the Brewers single-handedly. He is like the only good player on that roster as far as I'm concerned, but that's enough. He is, you said it. He is all the talent in the world, certainly slam dunk case for number 1 left fielder in baseball. He's got power, he's got speed, he's got an arm, he's got the glove. Usually hits for a really good average too, but I mean, 2020 was a weird season. I'm willing to more or less throw that one out.
I do want to see more of those Bellinger versus Yelich debates, and hopefully that will return in 2021. And once again, this has been a great week for baseball. Lots of things happening, lots of arbitration, big signings, and will be coming back in 2021. We have the start of our top 10 list. We'll come back to top 10 center fielders list. Hopefully there'll be another big signing. There'll be a domino effect. But until next time, thank you all for joining us. This is the Yankees and Velo podcast.